Before the story begins, if you enjoy high-stakes sci-fi stories where humanity stands toe-to-toe with gods and monsters, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment where you're listening from. Your support helps these stories reach more people. And now let's begin. No civilization in the galaxy liked to admit fear, but the chamber of the Galactic Council was built around it. Commander Elias Voss stood silent at the outer ring of the amphitheater as 12 species argued beneath a ceiling of drifting star maps. The projections showed burned orbits, shattered worlds, and the long black scar that marked the Predator's last passage through civilized space. Thousands of light years condensed into evidence. Proof, the Council called it. To Elias it looked more like guilt traced in fire. He was human, earthborn, and the only one present without natural armor, extra limbs, or bioengineered intimidation. He wore a simple dark uniform, no medals, no polished heroics. Humans did not intimidate the galaxy by appearance. That had never been their strength. The apex predator has awakened, intoned the Veil Corinne speaker, its crystalline throat glowing as it spoke. Every prior encounter follows the same pattern. Fleets erased. Systems silenced. Species extinguished. Murmurs rippled outward in waves of alien sound and color. Fear masquerading as consensus. Elias finally lifted his eyes to the projection. He had seen the predator closer than any being in that chamber. Not through reports. Not through mathematics. He had seen it breathe. "You are certain it is moving toward council space?" demanded one of the armored counselors. "It does not deviate once committed," replied the speaker. "And this time, it crosses 13 inhabited sectors." The word genocide went unspoken. It didn't need to be voiced. History had learned that lesson the hard way. The council voted with horrifying speed. Total mobilization. Superweapon authorization. Planetary scorch protocols. A war not to defeat the predator but to erase it, no matter the cost. Only when the decision was sealed did the speaker's gaze tilt toward the human envoy. "Commander Voss," it said, tone sharpening. "Humanity is advised to remain neutral. This conflict predates your species' ascent. Interference would be unwise." Elias met the speaker's gaze calmly. He felt the familiar weight settle in his chest, the quiet certainty that followed every moment the galaxy underestimated his people. "Humanity doesn't have a history with legends," Elias replied. "We only have experience." The chamber stirred again, some in irritation, others in dismissal. A lesser species offering commentary where none was asked for. "What experience could humans possibly have with the apex?" a counselor scoffed. "Your fleets have never faced it." Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was etched into his memory, burned brighter than any star chart. Years earlier, his scout vessel had gone dark beyond mapped space. An error in jump math. 1,000 variables misunderstood. Humanity's reach had been ambitious then, still was, but the galaxy loved punishing ambition. The planet he crashed on had been lethal even without the predator. Gravity heavy enough to crush bone. Atmosphere laced with toxins. Life that evolved to hunt everything that remained breathing. He had survived 3 days alone. On the fourth, the ground itself had moved. It wasn't rage that defined the predator. Or hunger. It had been presence, overwhelming and impossibly controlled. An intelligence older than fear. Elias remembered the way it had watched him, testing rather than attacking, as if deciding whether he deserved the energy it would take to kill him. It never struck. Instead, when another hunting species descended on Elias's shelter, the predator had annihilated them with terrifying efficiency. Then retreated, leaving him alive and shaking in the rain. That was the moment the galaxy didn't understand. The apex predator did not destroy mindlessly. It chose. Back in the council chamber, alarms suddenly warbled. The star maps shifted, red vectors carving through space toward the heart of civilization. "Confirmed," an aide shouted. "The predator has altered course." Silence fell like a vacuum rupture. "It's accelerating," another voice said. "Toward human-controlled territory." Dozens of eyes turned to Elias at once, no longer dismissive. "That's impossible," the speaker said. "Humans possess no strategic value to it." Elias folded his hands behind his back. His pulse steadied, his thoughts aligning with the clarity that came before catastrophe. "No," he said quietly. "We possess something else." "What?" demanded the counselor. Elias exhaled through his nose, eyes never leaving the projected path. "Recognition." While warships began spooling their weapons across the galaxy, humanity sent a different signal. Open band. Unencrypted. Personal. It carried no threat, no demand. Only a voice the Predator had already spared once before. "This is Commander Elias Voss," he spoke into the void, his words traveling faster than any fleet. "I know you remember me." In the council chamber, generals whispered predictions of disruption storms and counterfire solutions. None of them noticed the smallest change on the map. The Predator slowed. Just enough. Enough to listen. And in that hesitation, the galaxy's long-held assumptions, the certainty that power meant annihilation, began to crack. Elias felt it then the same way he had on that hostile world years ago. The gathering presence. The patient attention of something that had never needed permission to exist. The Council had chosen war. But the Predator was answering with something far more dangerous. A response. And this time humanity stood at the center of it. The signal Elias sent did not carry words alone. It carried memory. As the transmission raced ahead of human space, Elias allowed himself to sit as the council chamber dissolved into motion and argument around him. He closed his eyes and returned to the moment when the apex predator had first decided he was not prey. The crash had shattered his ship and his leg in the same violent instant. Elias remembered dragging himself from the wreckage, the air burning his lungs as gravity pressed him into the ash-colored soil. He had trained for hostile environments, but training never accounted for the silence after desperation sets in. The kind where every breath becomes a negotiation. The fourth night was when the ground trembled. He had thought it was tectonic movement at first, a dying world shifting its bones, until the silhouette rose against the broken sky. Massive, asymmetrical, layered in armor shaped by evolution rather than design. It was not monstrous in a way that invited revulsion. It was absolute, like a storm that had learned how to think. The apex predator did not roar. It did not rush. It observed him with an intelligence that stripped away illusion. Elias had felt his heartbeat slowing, not out of calm, but because panic realized it was meaningless. His weapon had been useless. He remembered lowering it, not in surrender but practicality. There was no point pretending. The predator stepped closer, talons sinking into stone without effort. It loomed over him, close enough that Elias felt the vibration of its internal systems. Something between breath and energy flow. He expected pain. Instead, it angled its head slightly, studying the blood on his hands, the improvised splints, the deliberate way he had chosen survival over despair. Then it left. No final glance. No dominance ritual. Just disinterest so complete it bordered on respect. Survival became routine after that, if routine could be applied to poisoning plants, predatory skies, and equations solved under fever. Elias adapted. Humans always did. He stopped thinking in days and started thinking in problems. Eat, shelter, water, motion. That was when another species found him. Skeletal quadrupeds with mirrored eyes and chitinous hides cresting the ridge near his shelter. Predators of a different sort, hungry, efficient, and numbers-driven. Elias barely had time to raise his rifle before they charged. The earth exploded. The apex predator descended with clinical precision. One strike collapsed 3 bodies. Another pulse of force reduced the rest to fragments before their fear signals finished firing. The violence lasted seconds. The aftermath lasted longer, long enough for Elias to understand what had just happened. The predator did not turn toward him. Instead, it positioned itself between Elias and the fallen creatures, scanning the horizon. Guarding. That was the first time Elias spoke to it. "Thank you," he said, voice raw and probably meaningless. The predator did not respond, but it remained. In the days that followed, an unspoken arrangement formed. Elias learned its territory boundaries. Learned which movements earned attention and which earned tolerance. When he repaired a broken transmitter using scavenged components, he noticed the predator watching, claws half buried in the rock, gaze unblinking. Curiosity, Elias realized. Directed, not instinctive. The second turning point came when the sky burned. Council hunters arrived without warning. Sleek war constructs cutting through the atmosphere, scanning for the lone life form signatures that matched ancient warnings whispered across the galaxy. They fired the moment they confirmed. The predator bled. Elias had never seen it wounded before. Energy weapons tore into its layered armor, not fatally, but enough to drive it into defensive fury. The hunters coordinated well, too well for prey-driven resolve. This was execution. Elias did the only irrational thing left. He distracted the hunters. He activated his half-functioning transmitter at maximum output, flooding the area with false scans, flares, and noise. He ran, limping, firing useless bursts upward while screaming into static. The ships corrected course instantly. The predator understood. When it struck back, it struck smarter. It used the terrain Elias had learned to navigate. Weapons failed. Hulls ruptured. One ship attempted orbit escape and never finished the maneuver. When the last hunter fell, the predator did not pursue further targets. It approached Elias for the first time. Close enough now that Elias could see fractures in its armor knitting themselves together. Controlled regeneration. Designed restraint. A massive limb rested briefly against the ground near Elias, not touching him but unmistakably present. An offer. Elias placed his hand against the stone between them. A gesture meaningless to most of the galaxy, but universal to his kind. The predator withdrew, and moments later vanished into the wilderness, leaving Elias alone under a sky that had gone quiet once more. Rescue arrived 4 days later. Human medics pulled Elias from the planet half-conscious, his first words a warning, not a report. "It's not what they think," he told them. "And if they keep hunting it, they're going to learn that the hard way." Back in the present, the council chamber rang with arguments and mobilization orders. Elias opened his eyes as a new signal request flooded in, one the council had not authorized. A return transmission. The picture that resolved on the projection was not visual, not sound, but pattern, an echo of presence that pressed gently against the mind. Recognition answered recognition. The apex predator had not come to destroy human space. It had come because humans had chosen not to destroy it first. Elias straightened as the realization settled into the room like gravity. The war the council had prepared for was no longer inevitable. But what followed might be far more consequential. The council did not know how to interpret silence, so it answered with force. By the time Elias stepped onto the command deck of the human cruiser Horizon's wake, the galaxy was already burning in controlled patterns. Council task forces emerged along the Predator's projected path, their formations dense with overlapping fire lanes and weapons never meant to be seen by lesser species. Humanity's fleet, lean and outnumbered, spread itself thin across the outskirts, not as a challenge but as a statement. Elias watched the tactical feeds without illusion. The Council believed mass equaled certainty. It always had. Predator Vector confirmed, reported Lieutenant Mara Keen, her voice steady despite the data streaming past her. Range closing faster than predicted. They overcommit, Elias said. It's reacting, not advancing. Reacting to us? She asked. Reacting to being hunted, he replied. The first exchange rewrote centuries of military doctrine. Council fire blossomed like artificial suns, saturating space with energy dense enough to fracture moons. For a single breath of time, the Predator vanished into the chaos. Celebration rippled through Council channels in careless bursts of triumph. Then the void twisted. The Predator re-emerged inside the formation, not by speed alone, but by precision that bordered on foresight. Entire battle groups went dark as their command nodes collapsed. Ships fired upon targets that no longer existed. Doomsday weapons malfunctioned as if denied permission to function. Elias felt it even through screens, a pressure not hostile but immense. The Predator was not escalating. It was containing. They're dying, King whispered. They chose to, Elias said, and hated how true it sounded. A Council dread carrier broke formation and attempted planetary fallback. The Predator turned toward it, and the ship ceased to be a singular object. The destruction was clean, almost merciful, and horrifying because of it. Council channels deteriorated into chaos. Human vessels, a foreign commander barked across an emergency band. Engage the entity immediately. This is an order sanctioned under extermination authority. Elias cut the channel without response. Bring us forward, he said. Keen hesitated. Sir, that will put us directly between. I know. Human ships advanced. Compared to the Council armada, the maneuver bordered on absurd. No shields flared aggressively. No firing solutions locked. Human vessels simply moved, aligning themselves along the Predator's vector. Several Council ships retarget at once. Hold course, Elias ordered. Open all comms. Unencrypted. The bridge fell into tense stillness as his signal surged outward, not as challenge but as presence. This is Commander Elias Voss, he said, voice carrying calm into the storm. Stand down. All of you. A pause followed, brief, incredulous. You demand we cease fire while it slaughters us? The Council speaker replied, terror cracking through formality. It isn't slaughter, Elias answered. It's defense. The Predator slowed. Every sensor on the bridge screamed warning as the colossal entity adjusted position, not toward the fleeing Council ships, but toward the human flotilla. Energy patterns shifted. For the first time, It oriented itself openly where the galaxy could see it choose restraint. Elias stepped closer to the main display. "I know why you're here," he said into the void. "And I know what they did." The pressure intensified, then softened, like a tide obeying a familiar shoreline. Council fire hesitated. Crews faltered. Something ancient and assumed immutable was failing. The belief that power spoke only in annihilation. "It is responding to you," Keen breathed. "No," Elias said. "It's listening." Elias gestured, and human ships widened their formation, creating a corridor, not leading toward the council but away from them. An exit offered without conditions. "Withdraw," he told the council. "Now. Before your fear finishes what your weapons started." For a moment that spanned entire command lifetimes, no one moved. Then the predator shifted again, deliberately positioning itself behind the human line, immense and unmistakable. It did not attack. It did not retreat. It stood with them. Council fleets began pulling back, disorganized but alive. The weapons fell silent one by one, leaving only the hum of damaged systems and the weight of what almost happened. Elias released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The battle was over. The war, however, had only revealed its shape. As human and predator forces held position in the scarred darkness of space, a new truth spread through council networks, faster than fear, louder than doctrine. Humanity had not come to conquer the apex. They had come to be its counterpart. And the galaxy would never adjust easily to that reality. Silence followed the retreat like a held breath that no one dared release. The predator did not pursue. It remained behind the line of human ships, its presence vast and deliberate, as if acknowledging a boundary that had not existed before humanity drew it. Elias studied the tactical feeds, searching for signs of imminent betrayal, either from the council or from the entity the galaxy insisted on calling a monster. None came. Instead, something unprecedented occurred. Data began to flow. Not in packets or transmissions the way machines spoke, but in structured impressions that pressed against the mind with clarity and weight. Human translators struggled, then adapted, mapping meaning where syntax failed. Elias stood still as the first coherent understanding emerged, not as a voice, but as truth arranged carefully enough to be understood. The predator was not born. It was constituted. Long before the council existed, before its oldest species learned to bind atoms or name stars, there had been civilizations that learned only how to take. They expanded without limit, stripped systems bare, and left gravity wells full of silence in their wake. The predator was the consequence of that age, a corrective shaped by the universe itself, designed to prevent consumption from becoming extinction. It did not judge morality. It calculated balance. Elias felt the implication settle heavily in his chest. The council's oldest members began to understand at the same moment, and terror shifted direction. "You were never our enemy," Elias said quietly. A pulse of acknowledgement answered him. "You only became active when the balance was threatened," he continued. "And humanity didn't trigger you." The predator's attention focused on him more fully than before. Not ownership. Recognition. "We stopped when we could have taken more," Elias said. "Not because we were weak. Because we chose to." The council speaker reappeared on the emergency channel, its crystalline form dulled by something close to shame. "If what you say is true, then our war was inevitable." "No," Elias replied. "Your fear made it inevitable." Fragments of ancient history spilled from sealed council archives as the truth forced its way through political denial. Atrocities buried under eons of narrative control surfaced into open channels. Entire species once erased under the justification of growth. Worlds emptied to fuel industries now calling themselves civilized. The predator did not attack as the revelations spread. It waited. Leverage, Elias realized. Not through coercion but through exposure. Some council fleets powered down fully. Others held weapons ready, struggling to reconcile survival with guilt. Elias watched seasoned commanders confront the knowledge that the creature they feared had spared more lives than they had. "This doesn't end with sermons," Keen said quietly at his side. "They'll regroup." "They always do," Elias answered. "So will we." He authorized a limited action. Human strike groups moved with surgical intent, disabling remaining superweapons, sabotaging targeting arrays, and severing command continuity, not as conquerors but as custodians abruptly forced into responsibility. The predator coordinated seamlessly, suppressing threats with overwhelming precision while humans executed restraint. Each action reinforced the same truth. This was not an alliance of necessity. It was compatibility. A final council quorum assembled under fear of annihilation rather than authority. Elias allowed the channel. "You've been judged before," the speaker said, almost pleading. "Each time, survival has demanded sacrifice." Elias met its gaze without anger. "Survival doesn't demand silence. You just found it convenient." The predator shifted, attention briefly passing across the council leaders, not as an adversary, but as a system assessing unstable variables. Recognition did not equal forgiveness. Elias felt the moment crystallize, the kind that history compressed into a single sentence while ignoring the weight carried by those inside it. Humanity was being measured. Not by strength or numbers but by what it would allow to continue. "We will oversee the transition," Elias said slowly. "Your fleets stand down permanently. Your archives open. Your worlds remain intact under conditional trust." "Under threat," the speaker said. Elias shook his head. "Under observation." The difference mattered. The predator withdrew slightly, enough to signal acceptance of the framework. Not submission. Partnership. As systems stabilized and surviving council fleets dispersed, the galaxy's operational map rewrote itself in real time. Power no longer clustered exclusively around ancient species and inherited authority. Humanity had become an axis. Not conquerors. Not rulers. A reference point. Elias stood alone on the bridge as the final data streams resolved. The predator's presence lingered, attentive but distant, like a sentinel satisfied with the day's work. This chapter had ended without annihilation. The next one, he knew, would determine whether the galaxy deserved that mercy. The aftermath stretched across the stars like a quiet pulse, slow but undeniable. Smoke still curled from shattered fleets, and council worlds trembled under the weight of revelation. Elias walked the bridge of Horizon's wake with a measured stride, each step a reminder that survival and leadership demanded vigilance even after victory. He no longer felt the raw adrenaline of battle, but a steady awareness, a mental armor forged in countless decisions where hesitation could have meant extinction. Lieutenant Mara Keen approached, her expression caught between awe and exhaustion. "The broadcasts are reaching every sector," she said. "They're calling it unprecedented." Elias allowed a faint smile. They should call it deserved. Humanity had not claimed glory, had not demanded tribute. They had done what was necessary, what was honorable, and had stood beside a being the galaxy had feared as a god of destruction. That recognition, more than any medal or report, marked a shift no technology could quantify. Through the wide observation ports, the predator drifted alongside the human fleet, massive and silent. It had not retreated completely, but it no longer hovered on the edge of unpredictability. Its presence was deliberate, protective, and strangely patient. Elias felt the same cautious understanding he had sensed on the hostile planet years ago, the quiet acknowledgement that their fates were, in some way, intertwined. "The Council will not forgive this easily," Keen said, her voice low. "Or humanity's role in it." Elias nodded. "They can try. But we've set a precedent they can't ignore. Fear will no longer dictate our choices." He paused, eyes on the darkened void where distant fleets had once shined with confidence. "The predator recognized something about us. It knows what most of the galaxy refuses to see. That restraint can be strength. That choice can be power." The voice of the council speaker, fractured and subdued, crackled through an open channel. "Commander Voss, your actions, unprecedented. If what you claim is true, if the predator has allied with you, what does that make humanity?" Elias held the question for a heartbeat, then answered with calm certainty. "It makes us the species that refuses to be underestimated. It makes us the species that survives not by conquest but by understanding. And it makes us accountable for the balance of life the galaxy has long ignored." The predator shifted closer to the fleet, its immense form brushing against sensors without warning. It regarded Elias not as subordinate, not as prey, but as an equal. In that gesture lay centuries of recognition compressed into a single, silent affirmation. Elias's chest tightened. He had never felt partnership like this before. The creature's approval was not casual, it was earned, hard-won, and binding. A message arrived from one of the outer colonies, trembling with urgency. "The remaining council forces are debating. Some fleets are retreating. Others threaten retaliation." Elias read it quickly, then looked toward Keen. "They will try again. The question is whether they act from fear or understanding." Keen shook her head. "Most of them will never understand." "Then they will learn," Elias said, eyes scanning the stars that had once been a theater of destruction. And if they do not, humanity and the predator will ensure they cannot undo what has been corrected. The predator emitted a low resonance, perceptible through instruments but also through the mind, a subtle vibration of acknowledgement. Elias had learned to read it, to interpret the language of presence rather than words. This was no longer mere survival. It was trust, and trust was a far greater responsibility than fear had ever been. He turned to the fleet, issuing quiet, precise orders. Humans would hold positions around strategic points, protect vulnerable systems, and maintain a line not of conquest but of guardianship. Every movement was deliberate, measured, infused with the knowledge that they were not merely defending themselves, they were upholding the balance that the galaxy had forgotten. Hours passed, then days. Communications channels buzzed with speculation, disbelief, and awe. The galaxy could no longer claim the predator as a weapon or a myth. Humanity had not tamed it. They had chosen it as an ally, and the message resonated with a clarity that could not be denied. Choice defined strength. Finally, Elias allowed himself a moment of reflection. The bridge was quiet. Keen monitored systems, her hands steady, eyes focused. The predator lingered nearby, a sentinel of raw power restrained by purpose. And Elias, standing in the center, understood the enormity of what had occurred. Humanity had faced a being the galaxy labeled godlike, and rather than bowing to instinct or fear, they had earned respect, earned partnership. A distant pulse on the sensors caught his attention. A council fleet, hesitant, fragmented, peered from the edge of contested space. The remnants of fear still lingered, but they were tentative, restrained. Elias smiled faintly. "They see us now," he said. "Not as children, not as prey, not as myth. They see us as what we are. And they will remember." Keen looked toward the predator, whose massive form had begun to move in tandem with the human fleet, protective yet unassuming. "Do you think it will stay?" Elias's eyes followed its shadow, immense against the void. "It doesn't need to. But it will. Because we are aligned by choice and nothing else matters more than that." The horizon of space stretched infinitely, dotted with stars that had once been silent witnesses to fear and destruction. Now they watched the emergence of a new balance. Humanity standing firm, guided by judgment tempered with restraint, and an ancient force that recognized them as equals. Elias turned to the final display. The galaxy was listening, watching, learning. The predator's presence radiated confidence and calculation. Humanity's resolve radiated clarity and courage. Together they formed a line no species could ignore, a signal etched in light and consequence. He exhaled and allowed himself one thought, one truth to carry forward. The galaxy had tested humanity, had assumed weakness. Humanity had chosen differently. They had not sought dominance. They had not begged for survival. They had stood shoulder to shoulder with a force older than stars, and they had been recognized. The sensors flickered as distant fleets altered course, council voices now filled with hesitancy. Elias stepped forward, hands resting lightly on the rail of the bridge. The predator shifted in synchronization, a silent promise of guardianship and presence. This was no longer a test. This was a declaration. And as the first rays of a distant star fractured against the void, Elias knew the galaxy would never be the same. Humanity had found its place, not at the mercy of gods or monsters, but at the center of its own story, standing unbroken, unyielding, and recognized. The predator's acknowledgement was more than survival. It was validation, the climax of choice, courage, and consequence. And in that moment the galaxy learned humanity's name.